who are some communities and people, this is both creators and then their communities as well as ideological communities, who you are antagonistic with or who are antagonistic with you, who you are opposed to. There's some degree of conflict or friction between you guys. Who are some of these communities or people?
I think on the left, almost everyone. I think, at least at the very least on Reddit, almost every left-leaning subreddit has either banned me or will auto-ban people who like me. Um,
Mhm.
Most video essayists on the left. So the right is a given. Obviously, the right doesn't like me because I'm left-leaning. Any people associated with the Marxist-Leninist Maoist or Marxist-Leninist groups or with Stalinists online doesn't like me because they're all not respectfully red fascists, and they don't like the fact that I think that progressivism and democracy are necessary components of socialism. The anarchists tend not to like me because they're all like extremely overeducated anxiety cases who can't order pizza over the phone without having a breakdown, respectfully. The breadtube groups don't like me because I'm too insensitive, edgy, and irreverent, and they're all, the soft boy awoo types. So not so much there. There's some leeway in some communities, and there are people I'm on like semi terms with, but at the very least, there are plenty of detractors there. Hassan and I, he probably doesn't like me that much. His mod team hates me. And there's his community doesn't like me because all of my fans get insta banned from his chat for saying anything positive about me. I think I have a little bit of sway in some center-leaning communities. I mean, I've had some severe criticisms for Shiwan Head recently, but there is still a lot of overlap between her community and mine. Though hers is larger than mine, so it would be more, it'd be a slanted overlap, but it definitely exists. There are some other people who I think I get along with decently, but it's kind of difficult to say. I'm too controversial for any community to be completely okay with me, which means that most content creators will avoid being publicly friendly with me to avoid alienating that small group within their community who really doesn't like me. It only takes one active person out of 100 in a community to really slant the community perspective. Like, if you can imagine a live stream, right now I've got how many people watching right now? 6,500. If 1 in 1,000 people here, just six, we'll just round down and say six, started posting enthusiastically in the chat about how I shouldn't talk with you because you're a child molester and they know your name and you're going to use the clout from this convo to molest children. That's not happening, to be clear. But if it did happen, six people saying that, you
Mhm.
better believe that would be noteworthy to every single person watching. They'd see that in chat. They'd see that in the comments. That would be all it would take. People would, notice would be drawn. So because I have a fervent group of anti-fans, they're usually capable of skewing communities against me. I shouldn't complain. I'm clearly doing well for myself. Everything's for the most part worked out pretty well in my favor, and I'm clearly popular in spite of all that. But it is definitely a little bit of an impediment with the growth. There's not much you can really do about that in the long run, outside of like do the best you can and then keep doing the best you can. And I mean, that's what we should all be doing anyway. So keep at it.
Mhm. Are these all these conflicts? This knocking along, having conflict with everyone. Is it predominantly because of personality issues or rhetoric issues, or is it a political disagreement?
I think it's personality for the most part. I don't. Well, man, it's tough to say. I think it's mostly personality. The problem is a lot of the criticisms that I get politically are empirically incorrect in the sense that they will accuse me of being things I'm not or say that I'm not things that I am. In that case, I don't know where to count that because I feel like in that case, my personality is leading them to think I have different politics than I do. Or maybe more accurately, their perception of my personality causes them to associate certain political views with me, which just aren't true. I think there's a lot of overlap between the two because bad assessments of a personality will lead people to be less charitable when it comes to politics as well. Like, for example, if you can imagine two people making the same joke, right? Where let's say they're watching they're doing a live stream Let's React content. They're watching a video of some other streamer having a breakdown or whatever. It's a lady. She says something irrational as we are wont to do. And then the video ends. And you have a left-leaning and a right-leaning content creator, and they're both like, women. And then they do like a little laugh. I think a lot of people on the left would be willing to assume for the left-leaning content creator that it's a tongue-in-cheek joke making like fun of low IQ dismissals of women's perspectives based on their gender. Whereas with the right-leaning person, I wouldn't be charitable to them at all. I would just assume they were doing the thing that the left-leaning person was making fun of. So in that respect, your assessment of a person's personality can affect what politics you ascribe to them when they say stuff. So yeah, a lot of overlap there. Really hard to separate it.
I know that you say factionalism and purity testing are very big problems with the online left. Yes.
Yes.
Can you briefly share your opinions or kind of what you believe, what kind of factionalism is occurring and what kind of purity testing is occurring and why?
Well, the purity testing is relatively easy, I think. There's just a lot of cultural capital to be had in being very performatively self-critical and being the one to call out problems in other people. The people use it as a way of sort of generating clout. I think the left also has an innate suspicion of people in positions of power. A large YouTuber doesn't have power in like an institutional sense, but in a social sense, they have a ton of power. And I think that a lot of lefties are just kind of naturally inclined to be suspicious of those types, which isn't necessarily wrong. I think that instinct is fine, but it can often lead people to be sort of like mindlessly antagonistic or derisive, you know. Like I remember quite a few times ContraPoints has had certain sections of Twitter try to cancel her or attack her, sometimes being really ruthless too. I mean, like really going after her life for total inanities, just for absolute nonsense, for stuff, not only stuff that isn't problematic, but like stuff that in left-leaning spaces you could just say it'd be fine. It's just the internet. There's always someone who's going to be mad and rile other people up. And again, if you're seen as the person who's pointing the finger outward, you're not having the finger pointed at you, and it's a common human issue. But I think it's worsened in areas that it's worsened in communities that have a very high opinion of their ability to identify other people's moral failings. You see the same thing in religious communities. I loathe to make the comparison, but if you go on, if you go on and see how like religious communities talk about other people's perceived failings, they tend to be highly judgmental. I mean, Christians are very judgmental. Their whole religion is based on this to a large extent. And that's because, they all feel like they have a divine handbook to objectively correct moral behavior. Lefties do too. Obviously, I don't think lefties are quite that dogmatic, but at times they make an effort to approximate it. And as for the factionalism, this is just a very common left issue. I mean, this goes back literal centuries. Everybody on the left has their own roadmap to revolution. Everybody on the left has a very particular idea of the way in which they want to improve the world. And, you know, there's one path backwards and a million paths forward. People who are progressive in nature tend to be much more likely to split and fragment. This has happened with actual leftist governments. It's happened all over the world. It's happened in the USSR, in China, in Spain, in Germany. It happens all the time. One of my prescribed solutions to this is to not focus on the long-term goals. You know, it's kind of like trying to find a life partner. If you're trying to find somebody you want to settle down with, there are some basic elements of the future that you want to work out, right? Do you want kids? Do you want pets? Do you want to live in a city or in a rural area? Do you want to so I was going to say indoctrinate like a Reddit atheist. Do you want to raise our kids religious? So on and so forth. These are questions you might want to get an answer to. They're pretty important, but imagine like increasingly refined degrees of specificity. Like, oh yeah, are you the type of person who showers in the morning or night? Oh, okay. Are you the type of person who likes to do their grocery shopping in a big trip once every 2 weeks, or do you want to do it every like 3 days or what? Like, if the more questions you ask about the future to determine compatibility and long-term goals, the more likely you are to never find a person who seems like they'll be the right one for you. And the reason for that, obviously, is because when you already live with somebody and do love someone, compromise and negotiation are the ways you navigate these differences in opinion. A lot of lefties don't do this. They lay out their 57-point plan from the start, and if somebody has a different 57-point plan, even by 1 or 2 points, then that is a different ideology with different material conditions and a different set of advocates. Does that make sense? I think it's better to just focus on the 1, 2, or 3 immediate big points, and you work out the littler details as you get to there. I mean, we're nowhere near communism. Why argue over the like distribution system or policing system of an ideology that doesn't exist at the moment? Like, we're we're dealing with fascism and liberal capitalism right now. We're so far off from that.
Mm-hmm. So, how do you conceive of yourself? How do you see yourself on this in this community, on the space? Just generally, how do you think of yourself?
Well, as a left-leaning person, but I think in the day to day, like my interactions with my community and the way that I handle those, I tend to think of myself more as a comedian and life advice guy, which is funny because I would not at all like advertise myself as either of those things. But in terms of like the way I interact with the community day to day, I don't think of myself as a newsman, even though covering news is a big part of what I do. But I do make a lot of jokes. I do think that's a good like element of the presentation. It brings people in, and I would do it anyway. I think it's fun to do that. And I feel like I give a lot of personal advice, either interpersonally to people in chat or broadly, just as a rote matter of, you know, I think you should do this if you can. The politics is personal, and the personal is political, right? A lot of the issues we have are sort of broad projections of day to day struggles that we face. There was a lot of good writing on this from back in the civil rights era days, and like the black experience in America, and like what can you say politically about a country based entirely on day to day interactions of like a black man in the South. And I think that's a good attitude to take when we think of, well, why are there so many incels, so many people mad at women? Well, the answer to that question is rooted in billions of interpersonal, day to day interactions that happen between different people, between men and women, mostly, oftentimes also a lot of men and men online. But these things are rooted in like very basic social and emotional impulses. What makes people insecure? What drives people to pursue others? What's a good dating strategy, right? Like that, it seems trivial, right? But the question, how do I pick up chicks, is actually an incredibly fundamental, like life shaping question that a lot of guys, straight guys or whatever, are going to have defining a part of their life. That's pretty fundamental, yeah. But it comes across as juvenile, like the kind of person who would go online and talk about how to pick up chicks. We don't have strong, positive cultural associations with that. We have pretty negative ones, actually, which I think is a bit sad. It's not undeserved. A lot of people who go online and talk about how to pick up chicks are morally unenviable people, to say the least. But that's because they control the conversation on those particular topics. What I'm trying to get at here is that I think a lot of the bigger political issues that we talk about are really just extrapolations of individual emotional, social conditions we experience. And if you get really good at addressing those at their root, you not only get better at understanding the broader political issues, which is critical, but you get better at understanding how to talk to people about them, you know? God knows that the ineptitude a lot of third wave feminists have spoken on male dating, like the ineptitude with which they've spoken on that has contributed to a lot of social problems. That trope, like the feminist who like if a guy ever says they have trouble finding a woman or dating or whatever, like there's this screechy feminist who will go like, "Oh, well maybe you should treat them better." Or, "Oh, it's because you're acting this way or not." There are some feminists who act like this. I don't think they're in the majority, but the ones that do are indicating like an analytical failure, right? They're not they don't perceive of the political and the personal as being synthesized. They can only imagine that those personal questions are a reflection of negative political stances. They don't understand there's a reciprocity there, that people can have those questions be rebuked by what they perceive to be the left, or even imagine being rebuked by what they perceive to be the left, and that could inform their political stance. So that recognition has to be sort of worked towards.